So I just watched this video by Jeremy Corbell, and he's interviewing Chad Underwood, the man who filmed the Tic Tac UFO, supposedly. And it has a number of interesting things, but what I want to focus on is what pertains to my video, No Sudden Moves, which is about the FLIR video and trying to demonstrate whether the object actually moves or not. And I show various points at which the camera loses lock at the same time he switches between one camera and another. And I thought that demonstrated fairly clearly that it was in fact losing lock, but it seems like obviously people disagree with me, and Chad Underwood disagrees with me. Or does he? I think what Jeremy actually asks him isn't actually, have a look at Mick's video and see if you agree with it or not. He doesn't even mention anything about it, and he kind of asks kind of misleading questions, I must say. So I'm going to just kind of go through it. This is like the second time I've watched it. I've just kind of queued it up at the interesting point around the no sudden moves type discussion, and we will, I'll kind of live comment on what actually happens. Let's see.
Debunkers say when you're filming, it only appears to move left, but in fact, it was you banking your craft.
Aircraft was straight.
Oh, righty. So Jeremy Corbell says debunkers say that it only appears to be moving because you are banking your craft. And this is not what we say. This is not what debunkers say. I don't know any debunkers say, and it's obvious he's not banking the craft because you can see the actual horizon indicator does not move. So he is asking him completely the wrong question. The real question he should be asking is, debunkers say the camera loses lock because you're switching between different cameras, narrow and wide field of view cameras, or between infrared and TV cameras, actually different cameras, physical cameras that are actually different, or different lenses, or different light paths switched by mirrors. It doesn't matter, but they're actually switching something physically, and this causes the lock to be lost. That's the question he should be asking. Instead, he asks, did it lose lock because you are banking your plane? And of course, Mr. Underwood replies, no, of course not.
Straight and level at that point. If you look at the FLIR pod, there's no change in heading or altitude or airspeed. Our aircraft was straight and level the entire time. None of those things change. I'm not maneuvering the aircraft in a manner in which, in those circumstances, would cause the FLIR to drop track. That did not.
So, he basically just said what I've said, like that he didn't bank the aircraft because no one's actually saying he's banking the aircraft, and this is just a red herring, a straw man invented by Jeremy Corbell so he can say, oh, debunkers say that banking the aircraft. And no, debunkers do not say that. And so, of course, Underwood was quite correct in saying that there was no banking of the aircraft growing, and so there's no reason for that to cause the lock to be lost.
Did not happen. I was at a very benign heading, airspeed,
True.
Altitude, and bank angle that the FLIR will not drop that track.
Yeah, the FLIR is not going to drop the track from plane movements if the plane isn't actually moving and you're just flying along in level flight behind something and you don't change the camera that you are using.
When the aircraft zips off to the left and you see the two bars that were on either side of the Tic Tac, you'll see they'll try to reacquire. When you see those two bars kind of widen, that means it's trying to open up its eyes wider to find you again and then get back to an auto track. By that point, the Tic Tac is already way off the left side of my.
Okay, so this is fascinating because he talks about the bars widening and the Tic Tac going off to the side, and he says that by the time the bars are widened enough, the Tic Tac is too far away, and so it can't reacquire track. So that means it's lost track when it's widening these bars. And he only talks about this in the context of the very final bit of the video, at the end of the video, where it zips off to the left-hand side. But the thing is, it does this several times throughout the video. It actually loses track and reacquires track several times throughout the video. And it doesn't, almost like he doesn't seem aware of this. There's several points, and I go through them all in my No Sudden Moves video. Let's see if I can just demonstrate one real quick. Let's see here. Here's the FLIR video, and there's, at the end, yes, it goes off to the side. There's the bars widening, but it's already gone outside, so it zips off. But if you go back a bit in this video, oh, there it is. And we press play here. There's this swivel, which is the camera doing kind of a gimbal adjustment. They have to do this when they're close to 0 degrees. You see it's at 2 degrees here. They do these gimbal adjustments because they have to reconfigure things for going the other way. And so everything goes around. You see the image swivel around, and the thing comes out of the two bars. So now it's lost lock, but it's not lost lock because of any sudden movement of the target. The target didn't swing around in a circle. You can see the entire sky swings around. You can see it's just a movement of the camera. It's lost lock because of the camera. And then what happens? The bars widen. The bars widen, and it reacquires lock. So in the middle of his sequence, his video that he filmed, he lost lock because of a camera movement, and the camera managed to reacquire lock. This happens several times. I go through various examples of this, and he loses lock for different reasons, but generally it's because of either some kind of glitch or some kind of gross camera movement, like this gimbal correction, or it's because it's switching cameras. It switches between a narrow and a wide view. And if it's losing lock here because of a camera movement, why isn't it losing lock at the end because of a camera movement? And it's not even a camera movement. This is a switching from narrow to let's see, from wide to narrow, I think at this point at the end. But it's switching cameras. I go through it all in my video. And let's watch the end bit again, actually. All right, so the camera widened the bars, but it was already a little bit outside of it. And at that point, still in one-time zoom here, note, we'll come to that in a second, it's outside. It didn't manage to reacquire lock, and so it continues on outside. And it's lost lock, basically. Just this time it lost lock, didn't reacquire it previously, and several times it lost lock, reacquired it. All right, let me just go back and let's see what we were talking about here.
My scope, and basically it's gone.
They also say that there was a 2-time zoom right at that moment when the Tic Tac UFO appears to shoot off to the left.
They also say, I'm imagining he's referring to me because I talked about the 2-time zoom. The 2-time zoom makes it look like it's moving faster than it is. That's all. The 2-time zoom has nothing to do with losing lock because it's only a digital zoom. Nothing at all to do with losing lock. It won't have any effect whatsoever. The system isn't going to take that into account. So I didn't say the 2-time zoom will make it lose lock. I said all these other things, a whole bunch of different things will make it lose lock. I didn't say the 2-time zoom. But which one does Jeremy choose to actually bring up as an example? The one that I didn't say.
So it's an exaggerated speed. Did you lose track on it? What makes it go left?
When you go from 1 to 2x or something like that, 1 to 2-time zoom, you're not dropping the track and trying to reacquire it in 2-time zoom. At no point will it drop track. Think about it like you're looking at your iPhone from 12 inches away, and all of a sudden you just put it in.
Obviously not. I know it's obvious, but not. And you can kind of see that here because if you look at it, when it loses track at this point, it's still at 1-time zoom. It doesn't actually go to a 2-time zoom. I'm going to single frame it forward here. And so you can see it goes to 2, right there. It doubles in size. The indicator lags a little bit, but it's doubling in size, and it's already lost lock at that point. This just makes it look like it's moving really fast, but then it actually doesn't move very fast after that. It's just this one big jump, and then it kind of drifts off to the side at exactly the same angular rate as the camera was tracking, if you work that out based on this, and that's all explained in my other video. All right, let's just see if there's any more of this.
And 6 inches away from your face. That's the only difference. You're not dropping that lock. All you're doing is basically just trying to get a closer look at it.
Agreed.
I go through all the zoom features, and I'm not dropping its track. The track is there.
That is false. He says he goes through all the zoom features and he's not dropping its track, but he is. It clearly says he is. He explained earlier that when the bars widen, that means that it's trying to reacquire the track, which means that it has lost the track. And you can see in several of those instances, the object continues to move to the left because that's the way it's moving, and the camera's like lost track, and so it moves off out of the frame. And it's quite dramatic in some instances. So he does actually lose track. I don't know why he's saying that he doesn't lose track when he loses track throughout the video several times and reacquires it with the widening bars and then focusing again. Just the last one he doesn't reacquire because it's such a large camera movement. It doesn't have the milliseconds required to reacquire track.
The entire time. It broke my lock by zooming off to the left.
It had already broken the lock. Zooming off to the left, it was just the natural consequence of its angular motion. It was moving in that direction. The camera was following it. It broke the lock because you switched from one camera to another. You switched from I think wide field of view or medium field of view to narrow field of view. So it's changing cameras, and you see that when that happens earlier in the video, it also loses lock, but it reacquires it. In this one, it loses lock, doesn't manage to reacquire it, the object just zips off to the left.
So you're telling me the Tic Tac UFO shot off to the left. The targeting pod lost track because it moved.
Yeah, the FLIR pod it's a weapon system, so it's made and designed and engineered for aggressive maneuvering and still be able to maintain stability on whatever it is that you've got acquired.
The Tic Tac shot off to your left.
Yeah, with instantaneous acceleration.
Okay, so he's basically bought into the idea that it shot off to the left with instantaneous acceleration, but his own video basically demonstrates that that is not the case, and is ignoring all the previous instances in his video where lock was lost and it actually moved a bit to the left. And these are all explained one by one in detail in my video. No sudden moves, which I'm going to append to this video, so you can just watch it straight away. But yeah, and then he talks about a bunch of other stuff. Now, I got great respect for people who work in the military. They're experts at what they do, especially while they are doing it. But they're not immune to making mistakes. And when the evidence is right there on screen and we can see things like it is losing lock, and then he says it didn't lose lock, he was wrong. Sure, he's an expert, but he's very, very clearly wrong in this case. And if he's wrong about this, maybe he's also wrong about, I would have been able to see the exhaust plume in the video. Or that whatever else were the other things that he said. So I focus on video analysis. I can't speak to things like radar jamming and things like that. But looking at this video, he says it didn't lose lock. The evidence says otherwise, based on his criteria for it losing lock, which is the bars widening and then contracting to reacquire. So what's going to happen now is everyone's going to say, oh, Mick West was wrong. Like Chad Underwood has come out and said Mick West was wrong. But the problem is, I don't think Chad even looked at my video. He didn't look at the No Sudden Moves video. He's just basically answering these questions by Jeremy. Like Jeremy says, like, were you banking your jet? Something I never suggested. Jeremy's asking, like, was the 2x zoom change something that made it lose lock? Yeah, I never suggested that either. Doesn't address at all the fact that he did actually lose lock. It's claimed that the Nimitz FLIR video from 2004 shows an unusual flying craft performing a series of high-G maneuvers, culminating with it shooting off at an inhuman rate at the end of the video. But I think it actually shows an ordinary-seeming craft moving with constant velocity, making no sudden moves. To help demonstrate this, I made a version of the video overlaid with a timecode and larger versions of relevant information from the display. I corrected the zoom indicator changes between 1x and 2x, so they happen on the actual frame of the zoom change and not a few frames later as they do in the original. I added indicators when there's some kind of lens change or a gimbal adjustment or other events that cause apparent motion. There's a link to this version of the video in the description below. The number at the top shows the heading of the camera in degrees relative to the front of the plane. This goes from 4 degrees right to 8 degrees left. The horizon indicator in the middle shows that the plane is not turning. So this means that the object has an apparent angular movement to the left. The indicator gets a bit squirrely around 0, probably due to gimbal lock issues, but if we take the 7 degrees of motion from the start of 1 degree left at 44.15 to the start of 8 degrees left at 1:12.27, that's 7 degrees in 29 seconds and 12 frames, or about 4.2 seconds per degree of leftward motion. So we've got this object moving left. The camera is tracking it so it stays in the middle of the screen. You can't see any background in the video, so there's no visual frame of reference for the motion, but it might look something like this if there were some clouds just behind it. To accurately get the speed here, I set the field of view in the 2x narrow mode to 0.35 degrees, as found in the SCU report. So it takes about 4.2 times 0.35, or about 1.5 seconds to traverse a frame. What would happen if the camera stopped tracking the object? The object would then just keep moving left at the same angular rate, taking about 3/4 of a second to leave the narrow 2x view, and that's exactly what we see. So why would it stop tracking? Well, the camera is tracking the object visually. We know this because every time there's a physical lens change or a camera change or a sudden rotation of the camera, we can see the lock being briefly lost. You see the bars expand as it tries to reacquire the target, then they contract around it when it's locked on. But while it's locking back on, or if it never locks back on, then the object will just continue its motion to the left, looking like it's suddenly changed speed when it's actually just the camera. So here's what happens in this video. At 0:40.29, there's a lens change from TV mode to IR mode. Lock is very briefly lost. The object goes to the left for a few fractions of a second, and then the camera catches up and the tracking continues. At 0:43.13, there's an interruption of the video. Lock is again briefly lost, a slight leftwards movement, and then we are locked back on again. At 0:49.06, the camera does a gimbal rotation adjustment to prepare for transiting 0 degrees. You can see that the entire scene rotates. Lock is lost, and the object ends up a bit to the left. It drifts a bit more left, and then we lock back on. At 0:55.20, there's a similar thing with a very tight circular movement and a small movement to the left. At 1:11.28, there's a lens change from narrow to medium fields of view. Because this is the same camera, there's less blanking. So as we transfer between lenses, we see the object seem to shoot off to the bottom left. It then reappears in the center, but as we've lost tracking, it moves slightly to the left. The reticle expands, we lock back on and back to tracking. At 1:14.00, a similar thing happens going back to narrow, but with the change being more obscured. The object vanishes and reappears slightly to left to center. It's just outside the target reticle and we've lost lock. The reticle expands, but the object has already started to move left. The reticle expands again, but now the object is outside and moving left. So it never gets the lock back and the object drifts leftward. We're in at 1x zoom here, so it's not moving left that fast. But then, at 1:14.14, the pilot switches from 1x to 2x zoom, causing a sudden jump in the apparent position of the object. It then continues to drift off to the left twice as fast as before, at exactly the speed we calculated earlier. So all the apparent movements we see are consistent with the object simply moving in a straight line to the left. So this is perfectly consistent with something like a distant aircraft, just flying along quite normally, making no sudden movements. So if this interpretation is correct, what does it mean? It means that To the Stars Academy is wrong. It means the experts on the History Channel were wrong. It means the SCU report is wrong. It means Jeremy Corbell was wrong. And it even means that about this one thing, Commander David Fravor was wrong.
And then when they get close, it's going to zing off the left-hand side. And off it goes to the left. And that's pretty fast to leave that field of view.
When it just sort of like leaves the field of view and takes off to the left, how fast is that going?
For something to leave the field of view that fast with the pod just staring is pretty fast. I mean, it's like out of here.
Of course, that does not mean he was wrong about anything else. Nor does this video showing something moving in a boring way mean that it's not a UFO. Nor does it mean that Fravor and other people didn't observe different things doing more exciting things at different times. It just means that, despite what everyone was saying, the Nimitz FLIR object is not an extraordinary craft. It makes no sudden moves.